Okay, I think we're connected now, so the recording. Okay, today on DPH Conversations, I want to be talking with Dr. Roger Elmore. Dr. Elmore is an emeritus professor and Heerman Chair and at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. He's been working in the areas. He's an agronomist and the cropping systems agronomist, probably with about 4 decades of experience in that area. So has lots of experience and lots of experience also with the Dr. Plant Health students. He was before he retired, he was on our supervisory committee with the Dr. Plant Health program, and also in his work, he worked with interns from the Dr. Plant Health program as well. So he has a good perspective on just what we're about and kind of how we go about things. So Roger, what are some of the what do you see as kind of the need for ag professionals with this type of more in-depth interdisciplinary training and expertise in agriculture today?
I was thinking that when I first started out on the farm back in Illinois with Dad, life was pretty simple. Dad wouldn't have said that, but it was. You probably remember this too, Gary. We had a 40-inch row planter and 4 rows and WD Alice and 4 cylinders and 2 other tractors maybe on the place. No horses. Horses were gone. Dad's selection of hybrids was based on Grandpa sold some seed and my uncle sold some seed. So he bought seed from both of those guys. Tried to keep both sides of the family happy, because Grandpa was Mom's dad and my uncle was Dad's brother. So he tried to keep both sides happy. But his hybrid selection was minimal, and he went with the guys that probably had the most of. I think he might have had an herbicide or 2 in his shed, but we cultivated corn, and that's what I spent my early childhood doing, is cultivating corn all the time. So life in agriculture was pretty simple. But today, as you know, we've got systems, global positioning, we've got a whole bank of herbicides and insecticides and fungicides and thousands of hybrids to choose from. And I'm not even getting into the mechanical side of tractors and all the equipment and necessary to handle a farm. So things are far more complex than they used to be.
Yeah, are there any specific areas that you feel that really are driving that need? I mean, things are more complex, but people making, again, systems decisions, a lot of it used to be on kind of feel and well, we always did it that way, or we did it that way last year, or we did it that way last year and it didn't work, so we're gonna do it a different way. And what kind of factors in decision making do you think really feed into this need for probably having people that understand things, or again, understand and deal with the whole production system?
Good question. I pause to think about it. Technology is driving a lot of it. The thing that goes along with that story, Dad might have been able to make back in the 60s. Don't quote me on those numbers, but today.
Roger, you're cutting out a little bit. I don't know if you need to be closer to the mic or just what's going on, but okay. Sometimes it comes in really good and sometimes it kind of cuts in and out.
Okay. How I'm a little closer. Does that sound better?
It does. Yeah, I think so.
I've got an earplug too I could use if that would help with that.
Well, I'm not sure. Headphones, you mean?
Just earbuds and a microphone.
Oh, okay. Well, we can try it. I think most of the time you come in pretty good. That particular response was really spotty. So
Okay.
but we can try to keep going.
But you want to try to ask the question again and I'll start over?
Okay, yeah, I'll just I'll start with kind of where it started to get broken up. But I think, given all the need for this more information and more things that are factors and more complications on the farmers, and what do you feel are some of the driving factors that really are leading agriculture to that realm that more information is needed, more data that goes into decisions and that type of thing.
Sure. Well, good question, because a lot has changed since I started on the farm and back in the 50s and 60s, because yields Dad might have made 60 to 80 bushels per acre on a good year. And today, I hear dryland yields there in Nebraska, some of them were up to 200 bushels without irrigation. Tremendous ranges there and improvement in productivity. And technology is largely driven that. The Green Revolution was behind that, Gary, is probably know that ideas that came along with that, increased fertilization and insect control and disease control, and all these things were part of the package that came along with that Green Revolution. Fertility, obviously, too.
Mhm.
All those things have driven yields.
Yeah.
You were going to say something else.
Yeah, maybe we better try the headphones. It's still kind of cutting out. I can hear most of it, but it's still just kind of
Okay.
kicks
It'll take
out
me
every once in a while.
a minute. I'll
That'd be
change
fine.
my.
Take whatever time you need.
Okay. And I'll move into another room too, Gary.
Oh, okay.
Is that background working or is it too ghostly?
Well, I think it's okay. I'm not too concerned about that. It's a nice background.
Yeah. Let me.
I think it's like anything else. Once you kind of get settled down, if you don't move around a lot, it's not a problem at all.
Okay. Maybe that's what I've been doing, is moving too much.
So I think when you start moving, I think the computer starts trying to chase you down, and it's always a little bit delayed. So
Yeah. All right.
does my voice come through okay?
Oh boy. Yeah, you're too loud.
Oh,
Can you hear me though?
yes, I can.
I need to turn my volume down. Hold on.
Okay,
Keep talking. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Testing.
How
Don't want
about
to blow out an eardrum or anything.
That's the way it was, but this is better for me. I can
Okay,
hear you
good.
better.
All right, good deal. Yeah, hopefully it all gets recorded fine. I think the last time I did this with Lee just before Christmas, I think it turned out fairly well. So,
Okay.
but maybe we'll just kind of start from the top, just so that we have more of a consistent thing. If that's okay with you.
Sure.
Today on DPH Conversations, I'm talking with Dr. Roger Elmore. Dr. Elmore is an emeritus professor at the University of Nebraska. When he was here, he is the Heerman Chair in the Department of Agronomy and Horticulture here at UNL. And he has about 40 years of 4 decades of experience working as a cropping systems agronomist with a heavy emphasis in his work in extension. So again, extensive experience dealing in agronomy, dealing with the farmers, dealing with the ag professionals, solving problems and trying to address management issues. So has a good perspective also from the standpoint of the DPH program. He was on our supervisory committee for several years, and also supervised interns for the Dr. Plan Health for some of the Dr. Plan Health students. And so he's got a good experience in the field, and also I think a good feel for what the DPH program is. So I guess, Roger, in just to try to move into kind of a discussion about the DPH program, what do you see as is this an important need for trying to develop ag professionals that are trained at this higher level, more depth, and also the more interdisciplinary breadth when dealing with practical issues in agriculture?
Oh, there's no question about it, Gary. When I first started in agriculture on the farm back in Illinois in the 50s, actually, life was pretty simple. Dad had a 4-row planter and a WD Alice and an 8N Ford. And I think the big day was when he brought home a 70 John Deere, which was today's scale. You don't even see them on the farms anymore, tractors of that size, except maybe lawnmowers or something. But he had limited choice of hybrids. My uncle sold seeds, Dad's brother, and my grandfather, Mom's dad, sold seeds, so we bought seed from those two guys, and they probably bought what they had. A very limited choice there. Herbicides, we cultivated everything, and I think later on in the 60s or 70s, he started using herbicides to some extent. I know the seed was treated, but that was about the extent of the chemical applications we made. And in today's world, all that has changed dramatically. How many hybrids do we have to choose from, and how many herbicides, and how many insecticides? And I guess you're getting the gist that life on the farm in agriculture is so much more complex than it used to be. So yes, there's a need for people that understand all these disciplines.
So you talk about the complexity. What's driving this complexity and driving this need, you think, for this need for this added expertise? Is this continuing, and what's kind of going to be driving this into the future?
Well, there's no question that is continuing. And as I look back historically, Gary, I think the big landmark, the big high water, or not the high water mark, but the change that had happened was the Green Revolution. As I think about it, and I hadn't thought about it until you asked the question earlier, that Borlaug and what he did there with wheat in Central America affected everybody around the world, including corn belt farmers like my dad, who started using more herbicides and more hybrids and more fertilizers too. Our fertilizer technology improved. So all this stuff, the technology is really what is driving this increased complexity. But as you know, it's also increased yields dramatically. I don't know if Dad could have got 60 or 80 bushels per acre out of the corn he was growing back then, but today I just heard a report just a couple of days ago from a farmer friend in Nebraska that their dryland acres, non-irrigated, central Nebraska, 200 bushels of corn. Can you imagine that? Dad, if I would tell him that, he would say, "My goodness, Roger, what in the world is happening?" Well, it's technology.
Yeah, it's technology, and I think as you indicated, also the one of the things I think that's important to think about in that same realm is that there's all that technology, there's more data going into decisions, but the other thing is that all those decisions are getting to be more expensive. More expensive from the standpoint of what they cost, but they also are more expensive in what those good decisions might return. So again, that's an aspect I think that you kind of allude to as well.
The economics are there, but and a lot of the economics, the profitability is in more yield per acre. And how do we get that?
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think with some of the technological aspects, some of the site-specific things too, is they're getting at some big important questions. I think now too is that it's not necessarily maximizing yield, it's more efficiency as well because of the cost efficiency. And some land doesn't have the potential to be 250, 300 bushel corn or whatever. And if you can identify that, you manage it differently than maybe some areas, maybe even in the same field. And so you really try to utilize the management of that site that is the most cost effective for the farmer. So.
Oh, there's no question about that. It's, that as I think about it, when I was in school, Gary, and I don't know about you, but they always talked about G by E interactions, genetic by environment interactions. But actually the part of the equation that misses is management. Mm-hmm. So the management stuff is the row spacing and the plant populations and the hybrids you use. Well, not the hybrids you use because that's the G component. Mm-hmm. But all those things, the herbicides you use and all those things, the management part goes along. And as we continue to improve yields, as we get up to peak performance, and for some people, it might be 160 bushels of corn, like you said, depending on the environment, where you are. But, our job is to use efficient resources most efficiently. And the profitability has got to be based on treating the environment well and using resources wisely. Dollars per bushel, not your what you get out of it, but what you're putting into it, your inputs.
Now, when you think about these agricultural production systems as they are today, what types of what types of career paths do you see that let's say DPH graduates might do well in finding rewarding and impactful careers?
Well, that's an open book, I think, Gary. Obviously, farming obviously would be who else integrates everything as well as a farmer does down on the ground level? Economics, agronomy, entomology, plant pathology, herbicide science, all this, marketing, all this stuff rolls together at the farm level. So the better, more diverse training you have, the better equipped you're going to be at that level. But also,
go ahead.
No, I'm thinking, academics, extension, crop consulting, industry is probably hungry for people with diverse degrees like the DPH program provides. Mm-hmm. What were you going to say, Gary? I interrupted you.
Well, I think just from the standpoint what you mentioned, I think that again this interdisciplinary component, putting these different components together in a management system, farmers have to do that all the time. Mm-hmm. And they oftentimes, I don't think you emphasize that, again, the experts that come in and provide input to them to help them make sense of all of this stuff. To some extent, different farmers have different interests, and some are going to be better at some areas than others. But anymore, I think the farmers seem to, and it's important for the farmers to rely on getting outside input and data. And the more of this comes together, the better they're going to be able to make these management decisions. But these management decisions are made in the system. They're not made in a discipline, say in entomology or plant pathology or soil science, whatever. All of those things come together. So having that systems background is important.
No, that's exactly right.
To kind of carry that forward a little bit, again, the program is fairly unique, professional program focusing again on across all of these disciplines, and really focusing on trying to establish people with a base of knowledge to tackle the whole system. What kind of you've gone through and have been exposed to a number of our graduates. What stands out to you about the DPH graduate as far as the capabilities that they carry forward?
I'm probably biased, but in that, Gary, but they aren't the typical graduate student. they're cut out of I've said this a lot, they're cut out of a different mold. To have that diverse set of interests and abilities and the skills and there's a lot of coursework involved here too, Gary, and across disciplines. So not everybody can do that. So I think they're pretty special people, the students I've met and interacted with, and I've had on my team at different times, and still do, in fact. Um, they're just special. And that's a positive thing, not a negative word at all, Gary. I hope you're getting that.
Yeah.
They're highly qualified, curious, innovative. I could add a few more adjectives, but I'll stop there.
Well, that's good. Thanks. Again, thinking about that, and maybe I think we've covered this somewhat previously, but just to kind of take this a little bit further is how do you see that the DPH graduates, how will they be able to really impact agriculture throughout their careers? We talked a little bit about the technology and bringing in technology and incorporating that, but how do you see, say, across the career of a DPH graduate, what type of impact do you think that they're going to be making for the producer, for society, really?
Mm-hmm. Well, integrating is the word that comes to mind, Gary, as you ask that question, and being able to integrate across disciplines is imperative in today's world, because who does that for us? I'm thinking of COVID right now. We're in the middle of this pandemic, Gary, and you're suffering from that. We are. Fortunately, we haven't had it yet, and my brother had it, I guess, but none of our close family here and around us, our kids or grandkids, have had it. But somebody developed that vaccine. Now, a DPH student, a generalist, somebody that integrates across disciplines, is not going to be developing that new vaccine. It's a specialist that works in a lab with microscopes and petri dishes and vaccines and all that. But so that's true in agriculture as well. You have the specialists that are developing those elite hybrids, those specific new herbicides. But all those specialists that do that need somebody that integrates that technology into practice. Mm-hmm. And that's what DPH people would be extremely well qualified for, taking current technology and tweaking it, or working with the people that developed that technology and getting it applied on the farm.
Yeah, that's a concept that I talk about a lot with students, is that there's a lot of technology that's been published and that's been developed and that's on the shelf, but you can't take technology down and plug it in here and make it work, and plug it in here and make it work, and plug it in here and make it work. It needs to be adapted to the situation in each particular situation. And oftentimes when technology comes down and it gets applied across the board uniformly, people complain that it doesn't work and they drop it off, and then they won't take it up for sometimes in a whole generation. And the reason for some of that, I think, is that the people that applied it didn't have the capability to understand what interactions occur when you apply it here, and maybe to tweak it and make it work a little bit better. And it might have just taken a small tweak, and over here it might have taken a little bit different type of tweak, or maybe a little bit more major tweak to make it work. And I think that understanding of the system is important to the application of technology. So I think that's what we hope these systems people, and I could say systems specialists, would have the capability to do this more adequately.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Gary. And as you're talking, I'm thinking of an illustration, and the words that came to mind before that illustration did in my mind. I'll tell you the illustration in a second here, but it's a blend of art and science. Mm-hmm. The science develops the technology. The art, I think, and is in applying that science, that technology to so it can be used. For instance, when I grew up, how big was a round bale? Gary, do you remember that? The Alice Chamblers had a round bale. They were the first in the world with a round bale baler.
They were
for
about
hay.
50 to 60 pounds.
Yeah, and they were about a foot in diameter, right?
So one person could easily pick them up and throw them around.
But was it easy to pick up a round bale and throw it around? I mean,
Not
weight-wise,
easy.
yes.
Yeah.
But how would you store those things and how would you handle them? And
Mhm.
so, those things didn't last long. But
No.
somebody comes up with the idea of these 1 ton, 6 to 8 foot in diameter bales that are 5 to 6, 7 foot long,
Mhm.
and it revolutionized the haying industry. Well, that's Alice had the right idea, but they just did the application. I'm not an engineer, you know me, but I did grow up with those round bales all over, and fortunately, I never had to stand on the back of a hay rack trying to stack those things on a hay rack.
Mhm.
It wouldn't have been possible.
Yeah.
So
I put in a lot of hours stacking the round square ones, but I never had to deal with the small square ones, but
yes,
I never had to deal with the round ones.
but that's fortunate, I think, because I think we would have,
It would have
I
been
would
a
have,
mess.
yeah, it would have been worth $2 an hour versus $1 an hour, Gary.
Boy, I don't think I was getting anything close to $1 an hour.
Well, you get what you pay for,
I guess, yeah, but I threw a lot of bales around, that's for sure. And I know I used to go stand on the back on the hay rack behind my uncle. My uncle was one of those guys that was a gung ho guy. Once you got going, you just didn't turn around and look. And I would have been it would have been deathly to have the round bales behind him because they'd have been flying all over the field.
But the point is it took somebody later on to think, this great technology, in fact, it's probably the same technology that they use. They just increased the scale of it to make that round bales a very efficient way to harvest hay.
Yeah.
And that's what I think the DPH student can do for us, the DPH professional. Take that technology that the scientists understand very well and make it useful, make it productive in today's agriculture.
Now, you've spent your career as a cropping systems agronomist in extension, number of years at University of Nebraska and then at Iowa State and then back at Nebraska again toward the end of your career. But how do you feel that these types of professionals would fit into extension? You mentioned it a little bit earlier, but just to kind of round that out a little bit.
There's no question that in extension, you're a little bit of a generalist, no matter what your title is. And understanding in my world, if I would have understood herbicides better, if I would have understood insecticides and insects better, if I would have understood plant pathology and diseases better, I would have been a better cropping systems agronomist. There's no question. Fortunately, I had those people like yourself beside me my whole career, whether at Iowa State or at Nebraska, I always had entomologists and pathologists and weed scientists were always beside me. But a DPH person encapsulates all those things together. At the same time, still leaning on the specialists in those different disciplines.
Yeah.
So I think.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I feel the same way. I think when I was in graduate school, I tried to take a breadth of different courses. I took a number of agronomy courses, and being an entomologist, I certainly took entomology courses. I took plant pathology courses, but even yet, I didn't get a good exposure to soil science. And going through my career, I think I really I got the soil book and I was going to read it, but over the course of the years, I can't tell you that I've spent a whole lot of time trying to glean the information out of that book that I wish I would have. But again, you get started, you don't have time to do that type of thing. And so I think that's what to me really cemented the need for building this broad, deep base that these professionals can kind of can really launch their career from. because they have that understanding. They don't have to, somebody gets a question on something they haven't been exposed to, they can rely on that base. They don't have to go to the internet and try to figure out, okay, what were they talking about, or what was this? So I think they can make those decisions and incorporate that information into what they're doing much more rapidly, much more effectively and efficiently.
Oh yeah, there's no question about that.
Yeah.
I was fortunate. I've probably told you the story before, Gary, that my first academic position, first out of my PhD program, was at Clay Center at South Central Research and Extension Center. And I got to sit around a table with all those disciplines, including an irrigation engineer and an ag economist. We ate lunch together. We had coffee together. So whenever I had an issue, guess what? I just took it down to the coffee table and talked about it with all these disciplines at the table. And I learned a great deal just from that. And essentially a DPH is a more formalized, systematic approach to getting that kind of an education that I had when I was a young scientist out there.
Yeah, I kind of went through the same experience at a research and extension center, and that I count myself very fortunate for that, because I had the interaction with these different disciplinary experts, and they could make up for, at least to some extent, make up for my shortfalls. But and I tried to help them out when they needed expertise from in my area as well. But it was particularly gratifying, I think, to do that. And I go liken back to one example, or many examples actually, where you go out and talk to a farmer as an entomologist, which I was, and they say, oh, that's interesting. They always hated to see the entomologist because we were never there to try to help them do things right. We were there to try to help them right a problem that they had, because they usually had problems when I showed up. It wasn't trying to grow things and get better yields. It was trying to get rid of this problem, or this insect problem. So that was one factor. But the other thing is, you'd always go there and you answer their question and you deal with what you were there to deal with. And then they'd ask you questions about, yeah, well, what about this fertilizer problem I have? And what about this weed problem I have? And I'd always have to, and it was frustrating for me because, yeah, I'd wanted to help them, but I said, well, I'll have to get you in touch with this person or that person, because they'll be the ones that be able to deal with that. And I think that's a kind of an experience that struck me from that standpoint. Is, we need people out there that can deal with everything across the whole system. And again, maybe not being experts across every area of the system, but to deal effectively across the system. And I think that's important, that we try to put people out there. And you go back to your earlier comments about increased technology and the need for understanding things at a better level. So, do you have any final comments about the program that you'd like to say? I think we've probably come to our end of our time here.
Yeah, no, it's just that it's an excellent program, and I was fortunate to be to have a hand in it along the way, and to work with some of these people and yourself along the way, Gary. But what an excellent program, and it's needed even more so today than it was 10 years ago or whenever it was first established, because agriculture is getting more and more complex, and the questions and problems that are out there are more and more complex. So we need that kind of individual out on the ground that is tackling those problems.
Well, okay, Roger, thank you for your time today, and also thank you for your involvement through the last several years. You've been a valuable contributor to the program, and I really appreciate it. So